Good morning, good morning. It has been a while since I have made a video, and I think this is the perfect time to do so. I hope everybody's doing well. I know this has been an interesting year. There's a lot of healing and transformation energy that is available for us, and I guess I want to talk a little bit about part of this journey for me. I'm getting that urge that I need to shift or move. And so I decided to go on an astrocartography experimental journey. So I know my best areas of the United States. It's on the East Coast. Pretty much from Florida all the way up to Maine is relatively good for me for a lot of different things. And so, me being a person that likes warm weather, I decided to take this adventure south. And so I'm experimenting. I know that these locations have come across as being positive ones for me in different ways. And so I live in Virginia, southeastern Virginia, on the coast. And I have been driving south. So right now I'm currently in Savannah, Georgia. And I want to talk about my journey thus far. Now, there's a pocket, an area that actually shows up a little bit lower on my scoring, and just because of the way that the lines shift, which is in North Carolina. So I want to talk about like my experience through this. When I entered into North Carolina, I didn't feel bad. I was feeling okay. It was so-so. I could tell initially, even just moving through there, that it wasn't a place that I would want to live. But as I went further south into North Carolina, I saw this big, huge Confederate flag. And I was like, it just completely shifted my energy. Like, okay, I want to get out of here. I began to feel unsafe in the area that I was in. And I really wanted to get out of there. And don't get me wrong, the land is beautiful. That's one thing I can say about the United States as a land. The America as a landmass is amazing. It's beautiful from coast to coast. And I've been blessed and fortunate enough to travel from coast to coast and see a lot of amazing places. And so I have a lot of love and respect for the land. But what I notice more so is the energy that is present because of the people. Honestly, there's no way around saying that, So I'm just gonna keep it real. So seeing that Confederate flag, it just completely threw me off. And then this morning, I think what's interesting, because I was feeling this kind of just offness as I went through North Carolina, and then this morning I saw that another black man was killed by the police in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, which is actually really close to where I live in Virginia. So I'm familiar with that area. It's like right over the border of Virginia and North Carolina. And they were protesting yesterday. And this was probably going on maybe after or before. I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but I was driving in the morning through that area yesterday when I experienced that feeling of wanting to get out of there. So as I went further south, and it was almost instant, when I hit South Carolina, my energy shifted and I just began to feel happy. Like I was feeling so good in North Carolina, and I'm South Carolina, sorry. And the further south that I went into South Carolina, right when I got around the Charleston area, I went into this zone. It felt like I was so connected to the space, the energy there. And I was like, oh, I want to live here. Like, I love this area. And it just really resonated with me. And so then, Savannah, Georgia and Charleston are not far apart, maybe an hour and a half. I did notice a little bit of a shift when I entered into Georgia. Not the same as what I experienced when I was in North Carolina. It was just kind of a slight shift, and it might have been because I was in a more industrialized area when I first came in. That played a part with that shift, and I like a little bit more open space. Don't get me wrong, I like to be in the cities, but it just felt really industrial, like smog and factories and stuff like that. But overall, Savannah has been nice once I came more into the city. And I like the fact that in South Carolina and Savannah area, that we have palm trees here. There's palm trees. So I love when I'm around palm trees. That's one of the things I missed about being out west. So that was like, the energy here feels pretty good. The people have been, friendly here. But it was interesting because I was sitting and I was reflecting last night, and this took me into my history. And so not only has this turned into just like my experiment on finding out about astrocartography, this has actually turned into more of a healing experience, I think. And usually that's how it works. I might not have set out with the intention of this being a healing journey, but it had its, the universe had its own intentions for me as I went along on this journey. And I remember when I was a couple of years, maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, my father used to live in the Chattanooga area, and he took me to this place called Fort Oglethorpe. And it's in northern Georgia. Sorry, my light went out. But this is not bad, so we can just leave it and roll with it. So he took me to this place in northern Georgia, Fort Oglethorpe, and he took me to this monument. Now, my maiden name last name is Gist, which is not a real common last name. You don't hear it very often. And we went to where the Trail of Tears started for the Native Americans. And there was this statue of this man named States Rights Gist. And I remember doing a little bit of research about this guy. He was a Confederate soldier, commander, and plantation owner, as many of the Confederate people of power were. And I just remember being like, whoa. I knew that biologically we were connected somehow, that this man was a relative of mine. But I kind of let that go over time. And then yesterday it hit me again, and I was like, wait. I was like, I remember that there was a governor of South Carolina that's last name was Gist as well. And so I started researching it, and I found this man's name, William Henry Gist. Yeah. So he was governor of South Carolina in the late 1800s, from about 1858 to 1860. Also part of the Confederate governing system, plantation owner. And maybe possibly had a few illegitimate kids. And I think that he may have actually been illegitimate himself, but his family, he was taken in by his father and raised by his uncle. So he ended up being able to carry the Gist last name because of his father taking him in that way. But I know he was born out of, he was not, his parents weren't married, and that was kind of a big thing, especially back in that time. So he ended up having some children, and one of his children's name was William Gist. Now I'm telling you this because this is really interesting. And this William Henry Gist, his son, William Gist, died in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, on my father's side of my family, my grandfather died when my father was a baby, or very young. So we never really knew much about my father's side of the family. It was never something that I heard him really talk about at all. It was usually my grandmother's family, but she would not talk about the dynamics with that relationship very much. I know they were married, but there were challenges there. So anyway, I found out that this man died in William Gist died in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is where my grandfather was born. And the interesting part about that, really interesting part, is that my grandfather's name was William Henry Gist as well. And my father's name is William Gist. So it just kind of hit me like, oh my gosh, these are I'm a descendant of these people. And I've known for a long time I have quite a bit of European ancestry. But it's one of those things that really made me just go into this reflective mode of the dynamics and the struggle that goes on for Black Americans, that I mean, I literally found out the plantation that some of my ancestors were on. This William Henry Gist, the governor of South Carolina, was born in Charleston, South Carolina. And so, I mean, I absolutely loved the feeling and the vibe of that area. I felt like I had connection there. But to find out that that's where he was actually from, it really was just an interesting awareness to come into. And for a while, I have been working on embracing myself as a complete person. Of course, I identify as a Black woman. I am a Black woman, but that's not to say that I don't have other dynamics that are at play. And I think that's pretty common in the United States. Most Black Americans have ancestry that is hard for us to come to terms with in some ways. Yeah, it's just not an easy topic to discuss, and there's a lot of hurt and that I think comes behind it. But I didn't feel that finally. You know, I've been doing a lot of work though on clearing some patterns that have been present. I didn't feel that feeling that I used to feel. I didn't feel anger, and I didn't feel hurt. I felt like I wanted to look at it and observe the situation and the dynamics, and try to even get into the way that the people thought, you know. So it was just this interesting awareness that I had, and I felt like I wanted to share with people. In some ways, I feel more comfortable in the South than I do in the northern part of our country. And maybe that's because when people are racist down here, you usually know about it. Like there's no secret, you know, clandestine kind of thing going on. They're pretty open, you know, that they're about their feelings. And in some ways, I mean, everybody's entitled to the way they feel. I'm not saying I agree with it, but look, at least if I know up front, I'm like, okay, well, I know not to be in your energy space at all. Like, I don't want to be around it. But yeah, there's a part of me that feels super connected to this area, from southern South Carolina into northern to Georgia, into Georgia, period. And I think it's one of those topics that we don't hear people talk about very often because it's so uncomfortable. And it is, you know, it's uncomfortable sometimes to talk about, although I feel much better now being able to speak on this. I think people need to hear this stuff because I think there's a lot of healing that can come from it, not just for Blacks, but for whites too. Because if we are really truthful about it, it impacted white people as well. And it left scars there as well. Maybe in a different way. But I think that when we look from the human design perspective and think about the epigenetics and the fact that we carry 14 lines back of our ancestry, of that DNA, those things are still there with us, waiting for us to be clearing. I think a lot of the animosity that we see in this world actually comes from a feeling of inner anger with themselves, like not having that self-love. And so instead of having, it's like the gate 10. And I actually pulled a chart for when the transatlantic slave trade started, when the first slaves arrived in America. And I think it's an interesting chart to look at because just like an event chart, you know, for when I do an astrological event chart, these dynamics were in play for everyone at the time. And the gate 10 was defined in that chart. Now, in quantum human design, that gate is called the gate of self-love. And I think it's an interesting dynamic because it kind of speaks to what has actually occurred in our country. So when this energy is in its lower form, if we're not loving ourselves, if we are feeling like we're not worthy and appreciated, we kind of project that feeling onto others. So that if we're feeling guilt, if we're feeling whatever, you know, it gets projected out onto others. And so looking at these dynamics and being able to now be an observer of it without so much of the emotional involvement and attachment to the situation is giving me a lot of healing, honestly. I find that I'm feeling more at peace with the dynamics, but it's just one of those things that's interesting to think about, that this gate and this lack of feeling loved or worthy that gets projected out onto other people as hate, because we may not be where we need to be within ourselves. And so, yeah, I don't know. This was just one of those things that I felt like was interesting to share. All in all, this is a great experience. I am going to be journeying a little bit further south. And I mean, my family is from the South, on both sides of my family. So there has always been this traveling back and forth to the South. But these cities are specifically Charleston and Savannah, I've never been to before, more so traveling through the central parts of these states. So this is a new experience, and I will keep you posted on how this journey continues.